This is the guitar body, the ash guitar body, from the guitar that I had in the Nashville music store. So I got a part 1 to this video where I talk about this guitar and I basically strip it down to where it is now. There's a link right here. You can click that link, go check that video out if you haven't seen it. So anyways, so what I originally was going to do with this guitar was sand it down to bare wood, put some black binding around the body, and then either leave it natural or stain it like a walnut or a darker stain like that. But after doing a little bit of thinking, I finally decided what color I want to stain it. So actually, white binding is going to work better for the color I'm going to stain it. So I had this white binding that I forgot I had, and I found it. So I got 2 pieces I got enough to bind this body. And basically we're going to put sand it back down to bare wood and then bind this binding. Now this binding is, I think it's like 60 thousandths of an inch thick is the thickness I want anyways, but it's a little bit tall, and I don't know if that's going to be a problem or not. I might leave it that height. That's more like I think that's more like a Les Paul style, or a Les Paul height on the way they use the binding on the Les Pauls. So it might be alright on this, I don't know. The only problem we're going to have is probably the jack hole here. If we bring it on, it's going to be close to the jack. So we got to look at that. But we're going to put the white binding on it. We're going to sand it down to bare wood, and we're going to, there's a couple other things too. The front's good, it just needs sanded down. But on the back, right here I got a small belly rest. And the reason that it's a small belly rest is this guitar body is chambered. So I can't take a whole lot away from here. But what happened was, whenever I was sanding it, it's not completely smooth. You can still feel the grain, to where this is smooth like glass, but you can still feel the grain. So I got to take a sanding block and get that to where it's perfectly smooth. So that's one of the flaws I got to fix. Another one is back here, and let me grab the neck real quick. This is the neck, and what happens is at the back of the neck, it's rounded like so. So whenever I put my humbucker cover on, there's a gap here and a gap here where the humbucker sits up against. And you can see that gap, and it kind of looks, I don't know. So we're going to fix that. We're either going to sand the back of this neck here perfectly flat so it sits tight against there. That's probably what we'll end up doing on that to get that fixed. And then I think that's really the only 2 things that are wrong with the body in the way of the body itself. Everything else is pretty good. Just sand everything back down to bare wood and getting it ready to resand. So I'm going to be using my Skill palm sander with a piece of 60 grit sandpaper on there, and I'm just using 60 grit just to basically strip the finish and get it down to bare wood. Once I get it stripped down, you know, I'll come back through with lighter grits and work my way back up to like 320, probably using like sanding blocks and whatnot. But for this part, we'll just use this and basically just get it down as quick as possible, but also trying to keep it, you know, naturally keeping it flat so it stays as smooth as possible. So, I got the back down to bare wood. I got the front down. And now I'm working on my armrest, which isn't much of an armrest anymore, but, or not an armrest, a belly rest, I mean. Working on my belly rest here a little bit. and just getting it cleaned up. And remember I said that you can feel the grain. So I'm basically taking this and just filing it down flat to where you can't feel it. Then I'll come back through with like 60 grit, 80 grit, 120, 150, whatever. Work way up to like 300, 320, 400, like the rest of the body here. So it's almost smooth. I got a little bit take off here, and then once that's done, I'm going to take this over to my spindle sander and basically get the side sanded down to where they're bare, and then we'll be ready to put a binding channel in it. Here's the line of where I'm going to put my binding channel. That's going to be the bottom of my binding channel. So the problem I'm going to have is with this jack is my bit looks like this, but it has a bearing on the top. So whenever I come around through here, it'll be good, but once it gets to here, because it's so high, that bearing's going to hit that hole. If it hits that hole, it'll end up driving that bit into the top and basically destroying that top. So what I've done, I took a piece of 7/8 dowel rod and I tapered the end, sanded the end down and tapered it smaller up to 7/8. And what I'm going to do is just slide this in, get a mark, which I got it marked right there, cut it off in a bandsaw, come back, slide it in and tap it in until it's tight. Then we'll take this over to the router table and we'll route this plug off flush so it matches the outside contour of this body. That way, whenever my bearing comes around, it'll hit this thing and it'll go right across there like it's supposed to. So basically we're just going to cut this off, drive it in, and then route it flush, and then we'll be able to route our binding channel. And when we're done, we'll just come back through from the inside here, and just tap it out with like a screwdriver or something. It'll pop right back out. Binding channel is routed in, so I'm going to come back through and take some sandpaper and just sand it down a little bit. I got to pull this plug back out of here, sand it down a little bit, and then the binding channel is ready. Should be glued on. We're going to glue that on here in a minute. Now I'm going to install the binding onto this body. Got my binding here, and I'm going to be using solvent cement for acrylic. I've used this before on basically on everything I put binding on. I've never had a problem with it, so that's what I'm going to use. And I got my masking tape, so we get started and start to glue this binding on. So we got the binding on the guitar, we got it taped off, and we're just going to let this set probably 24 hours. Let it sit overnight, come back tomorrow, take the tape off, and then we'll come back through and scrape the binding flush, and we'll go down through and start sanding the body down to 320, the back, the sides, the front, and then from that point, we're basically ready to start putting stain on it. Boom!